Nearly 1 in 3 vehicle owners are sold repairs they do not need, and engine noise is the most common trigger. You hear a sound. The service advisor hears a dollar amount. Those two things are rarely the same. 10 Mercedes engine noises, least to most serious. What each one means, what it costs, and what the dealer profits from getting wrong. Number 1 has destroyed more Mercedes engines than any other single sound because most owners kept driving. Number 10, ticking at idle. That disappears. After warm-up, you start the car on a cold morning and hear a light, rhythmic ticking from the top of the engine. 5 to 10 minutes later, once the engine reaches operating temperature, the ticking is gone. This is hydraulic valve lifter behavior, and it is normal on virtually every Mercedes engine produced in the last 30 years. Hydraulic lifters use engine oil pressure to maintain valve clearance. When the car sits overnight, the oil drains out of the lifters. The drain-down process is accelerated by thin or degraded oil. Correct specification oil at the proper interval minimizes it. If the cold start tick has gotten longer over the last year, that is a sign the oil is not holding up between changes. On startup, they tick until oil pressure fills them again. The process takes between 30 seconds and 5 minutes depending on ambient temperature and oil viscosity. According to Mercedes-Benz technical documentation on the M272 and M273 engine families, cold start lifter tick of this type requires no corrective action. It is not a warning, it is not damage, it is a mechanical system operating within its design parameters. The dealer will use this noise to recommend a valve train service, an oil flush, or a premium oil treatment additive. None of those services address what you are hearing, because what you are hearing does not need to be addressed. The correct response to cold start ticking that resolves within 5 minutes is to continue driving the vehicle as normal. Terry from Columbus brought his 2018 E-Class in tapped for this exact sound. The dealer quoted a valve train cleaning service for $420. A Mercedes specialist told him the noise was normal for his mileage and climate. He left without spending anything. 3 years later, the engine is unchanged. Up next is a cold start rattle that sounds worse than the ticking, and the two causes behind it, one of which costs nothing to check. Number 9, cold start rattle. Lasting under 3 seconds. This one sounds alarming. A brief metallic rattle on startup, heavier than a tick, usually from the front of the engine. It disappears within 2 to 3 seconds as oil pressure builds. If it is gone by 3 seconds, this is almost always a timing chain, tensioner priming. On Mercedes engines, the variable valve timing system and timing chain tensioner are both hydraulic. They require oil pressure to operate correctly. According to a Mercedes-Benz service bulletin for the M271 engine family, brief cold start rattle under 3 seconds is normal in temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The bulletin specifies that dealer action is not required unless the rattle persists beyond 5 seconds at operating temperature. Your dealer may not volunteer that bulletin. Describing a rattle to a service advisor without that context creates space for a diagnostic fee. The diagnostic fee typically runs between $150 and $200. It generates a report that, in most cases, confirms normal operating behavior, information you could have had by timing the rattle yourself with your phone. There is one case where this cold start rattle is not normal if it has been getting progressively longer over several months. A rattle that used to last 2 seconds and now lasts 6 is a timing chain tensioner that is wearing. The tensioner requires oil pressure to maintain chain tension. When the tensioner wears, it takes longer to build that pressure on startup. Tracking the rattle duration monthly is free and gives you more information than a $200 diagnostic inspection. That distinction is everything. Duration and progression are the diagnostic variables. The dealer wants you to focus on the sound alone. Greg from Nashville timed his 2016 GLC cold start rattle at 2 seconds in winter. His dealer quoted a timing chain inspection for $220. Greg timed it again in spring at the same 2 seconds. He did nothing. 4 years and 40,000 miles later, no change. If you are learning something here your dealer never mentioned, subscribe now. We cover this stuff every week. Number 8, valve train ticking. That does not go away after warm-up. This is the version of number 10 that does not resolve. The tick persists at operating temperature. It may vary with RPM, but it does not disappear. On Mercedes engines, a persistent valve train tick at operating temperature is almost always one of two things. The first is a hydraulic lifter that is stuck in a partially collapsed position due to oil sludge or oil chemistry incompatibility. According to Mercedes-Benz oil specification documentation, the M272, M273, and M274 engine families require oil carrying the MB 229.5 or MB 229.51 approval code. Using a generic European spec oil without the correct MB approval allows deposit formation in the hydraulic lifter circuits. Over time, these deposits partially collapse individual lifters, creating a persistent tick that does not respond to oil pressure changes. The second cause is a worn rocker arm contact surface, which is more common on M2H72 engines above 100,000 miles. According to independent Mercedes specialist data, rocker arm wear causes approximately 30% of persistent valve train ticks on M272 family engines between 80 and 120,000 miles. The correct first step is an oil change using the exact MB-approved specification at the correct viscosity. The specification code matters more than the viscosity number. MB 229.51 at 5W30 is not the same as a generic 5W30. One contains the additive package designed for Mercedes valve train chemistry, the other does not. If the tick resolves or reduces within 200 miles after the correct oil change, the cause was oil chemistry. If the tick persists unchanged after the correct oil change, the cause is mechanical and requires inspection. A dealer will skip the oil change test and go directly to a valve train inspection starting at $350. The oil change costs $80 and answers the diagnostic question in most cases. Sandra from Austin drove her 2017 C-Class for 18 months with a persistent tick the dealer attributed to rocker arm wear. A specialist switched her to the correct MB 229.51 oil. The tick resolved within 150 miles. Total cost, $95. Just ahead, a noise from the belt area that sounds serious and costs almost nothing to fix, and one version that costs a great deal more. Number 7. Chirping or squealing. From the belt system. A high-pitched chirp or squeal coming from the passenger side of the engine bay, particularly under load or at idle. This sound comes from one of 3 sources in the Mercedes serpentine belt system: the belt itself, the tensioner pulley, or one of the idler pulleys. According to Mercedes-Benz auxiliary drive system documentation, the belt tensioner on M271 and M276 engines has a rated service life of approximately 80,000 miles. This interval is not printed anywhere in the consumer-facing service guide that comes with the vehicle. It exists in the technical service documentation that dealers access, and owners generally do not. Most owners are not informed of this interval. It is not on the standard maintenance schedule reminder in most dealership service systems. A worn tensioner bearing creates a chirping noise that is loudest at idle and varies with accessory load. The noise sounds expensive, the repair is not. A tensioner assembly for the M276 costs between $60 and $90 in parts. Labor to replace it runs between 90 minutes and 2 hours. Roughly $120 to $180 at an independent shop. Total repair, under $270 for a noise that can send an owner to the dealer convinced they need a major engine repair. The belt itself is a $25 part that should be inspected at the same time. If the tensioner has worn, the belt likely has too. Dealers frequently diagnose the noise correctly but price the repair at dealer labor rates. These adds $150 to $200 to the same job. The belt system is not a specialist repair. Any competent independent mechanic can perform it in under 2 hours. David from Richmond heard a persistent squeal at idle in his 2019 GLA. The dealer quoted a belt system inspection at $180 plus parts. An independent shop replaced the tensioner and belt for $230 total. The same job at the dealer had been quoted at $410. Coming up, a rattle under hard acceleration that sounds like something falling off, and the cheap reason it is usually not. Number 6. Metallic rattling. Under hard acceleration, you accelerate firmly onto a highway ramp and a metallic rattle erupts from underneath or from the engine bay. It sounds alarming. It often costs very little to fix. This sound is most commonly a loose or cracked heat shield on the exhaust system or a loose exhaust manifold fastener. Heat shields are thin stamped steel panels that protect components near the exhaust. They are attached by small bolts that loosen over time as the exhaust cycles through heat and cool. According to Mercedes-Benz exhaust system engineering notes, thermal cycling on the exhaust manifold area produces between 500 and 800 expansion cycles per year. This cycling works metal fasteners loose over time. It is normal wear, not a warning sign of something larger. A loose heat shield rattle costs between $40 and $120 to repair at an independent shop. The repair involves tightening or replacing the mounting hardware. It takes under an hour. Dealers will sometimes diagnose this correctly. They will also use this noise to prompt an exhaust inspection starting at $250 and expanding from there. The diagnostic test for a heat shield rattle is simple. Park safely, let the car cool fully, and attempt to shake each heat shield by hand. A loose shield will move, a secure shield will not. You can do this yourself in 5 minutes and arrive at the repair shop with the diagnosis complete. Alicia from Tampa heard this rattle for 3 weeks before bringing in her 2020 GLE. The dealer quoted an exhaust inspection at $260. She found the loose shield herself, brought it in with that information, and paid $90 for the fastener replacement. Drop a comment below with the noise your Mercedes is making right now. Let us see how many of us are dealing with the same sounds. Number 5. Knocking under load at high engine speed. This one changes the conversation. A knock or heavy tap that appears only under hard acceleration or at high RPM is not a rattle. It is a warning. On Mercedes engines, knock under high load with no other symptoms is most commonly one of two things. The first is detonation, also called pre-ignition or engine knock, caused by carbon buildup on piston crowns or in the combustion chamber. Carbon deposits create hot spots in the combustion chamber that ignite the air-fuel mixture before the spark plug fires. According to Bosch Automotive Combustion Research, direct injection engines accumulate combustion chamber carbon at measurably higher rates than port-injected engines. Mercedes Skyactiv equivalent direct injection engines in the M270, M274, and M276 families are particularly susceptible. The knock sensor hears this detonation and retards ignition timing to protect the engine. You may feel a slight loss of power rather than a knock. When the knock sensor itself fails, the engine management system loses this protection and detonation becomes audible. A failing knock sensor costs between $150 and $250 in parts and labor. It is not a catastrophic repair. The knock sensor is a passive monitoring device mounted on the engine block. It listens for detonation frequency and reports to the ECU. When it fails, the engine runs conservatively to protect itself. You lose power and fuel economy before you lose the engine. Carbon cleaning of the combustion chamber runs between $250 and $450 at an independent specialist. Neither repair is something the dealer will proactively schedule because neither is on any standard maintenance interval reminder. The dealer benefits from you arriving with a knock complaint because it creates space for a full engine diagnostic starting at $200. That diagnostic will find the knock sensor or the carbon. You will have spent $200 to confirm what this list told you in 4 minutes. Kevin from Phoenix heard a knock under hard acceleration on his 2021 C300. The dealer quoted a full diagnostic at $220 plus repair. The knock sensor was replaced at an independent shop for $180. The knock was gone the same day. Just ahead, the knock that does not care about RPM shows up at idle and means the repair window is measured in miles, not months. Number 4, a rhythmic knock that gets louder, under load. This is a different category of sound entirely. A steady rhythmic knock, present at idle that intensifies when you accelerate, is a rod bearing warning. Rod bearings sit between the connecting rods and the crankshaft journal. They are precision machined surfaces that float on a film of oil. When the oil film fails from low oil pressure, wrong viscosity, or degraded oil, the bearing surface contacts the journal metal directly. That metal-on-metal contact is what produces the knock. According to SAE International Research on Internal Combustion Bearing Failure, rod bearing wear progresses through 3 stages. Stage 1 is a faint knock at idle with no other symptoms. Stage 2 is a knock that responds to throttle input. Stage 3 is a loud knock, accompanied by the oil pressure warning light. At Stage 3, the repair window has fully closed. Most owners who bring in a Stage 3 bearing issue drove past the Stage 1 sound for weeks. The cost difference between Stage 1 and Stage 3 is typically between $7,000 and $14,000. The window from Stage 1 to Stage 3 can be as short as 2 weeks or as long as 6 months, depending on driving intensity. Rod bearing replacement at Stage 1 or early Stage 2 runs between $800 and $2,000 on most Mercedes inline 4 and V6 engines. The repair cost at Stage 3 is an engine rebuild or replacement, starting at $5,000. This sound is one the dealer is motivated to address correctly because the repair is significant and legitimately necessary. The villain here is not the dealer. It is the extended oil change interval that allowed the oil to degrade until the bearing lost its film. On high-output Mercedes-AMG engines, the M156 V8 is specifically documented by NHTSA for premature rod bearing failure tied to extended oil change intervals. The NHTSA complaint database contains over 400 MBEM 156 rod bearing failures, most attributed to oil intervals exceeding 7,000 miles. If you own an M156 AMG engine and you hear this sound, change the oil today with the correct MB 229.5 specification. Call a specialist this week. Do not wait for the next scheduled service. James from Atlanta heard a faint knock at idle in his 2012 C63 AMG at 62,000 miles. He brought it in at Stage 1. 2 rod bearings were replaced for $1,400. The engine is at 112,000 miles today. If this is saving you real money, hit that like button right now. Number 3, timing chain. Rattle that persists beyond warm-up. A metallic rattle from the front of the engine that begins on startup and does not fully resolve at operating temperature is a timing chain warning. This is distinct from the number 9 cold start rattle because it does not disappear. It may quiet slightly as the engine warms, but it remains audible. The M271 4-cylinder engine, used in the C-Class, E-Class, and SLK from 2002 through 2015, has a well-documented timing chain failure pattern. According to Mercedes-Benz Technical Service Bulletin LI00 240P-288, the M271 timing chain can elongate prematurely due to wear on the chain guides and tensioner. NHTSA complaint records show over 1,200 documented M271 timing chain failures in the United States as of the last reporting period. The rattle comes from the elongated chain contacting the guide rails. In the early stages, it sounds like a faint metallic chain noise from the front of the engine. In the advanced stages, the chain has stretched enough to skip a tooth. When it skips a tooth, the engine stops. On some Mercedes engines, a skipped timing chain also bends the valves. The engine does not simply need a new chain. At that point, it needs a head rebuild in addition to the chain. The repair cost roughly doubles. Timing chain replacement on the M271 runs between $1,500 and $2,800. Engine replacement after a skipped chain runs between $4,000 and $8,000 depending on mileage and parts availability. The diagnosis is straightforward for any competent Mercedes specialist. A timing chain stretch can be measured without removing the engine cover. Dealers who service M271 family vehicles encounter this failure routinely. The honest ones tell you the chain is marginal at inspection. The others wait for you to describe a rattle. Michelle from Charlotte noticed a faint front-end rattle at startup on her 2011 C250 at 94,000 miles. A specialist diagnosed early M271 timing chain wear. The replacement cost $2,100. The alternative, had she driven another 6 months to the next scheduled service, was a skip chain and an engine that stopped on the highway. Coming up, a deep rumble from the bottom of the engine. This noise is no longer coming from a component, it is coming from the heart of the engine itself. Number 2, deep rumble, or rumbling knock at low RPM. A low, heavy rumbling from deep inside the engine, not the top, not the front, but the center or bottom, is a main bearing noise. This is a different category of problem from everything above it on this list. Main bearings support the crankshaft itself. They sit at the lowest point of the engine block. The difference in sound between a rod-bearing knock and a main-bearing rumble is pitch and location. Rod-bearing noise is a sharp, rhythmic tap. Main-bearing noise is a lower, heavier sound that may be described as a thud or a rumble. According to automotive engineering references cited by the Society of Automotive Engineers, main-bearing clearance failure is almost always associated with severe oil starvation or catastrophic lubrication. Breakdown. Unlike rod bearings, which can sometimes be replaced without pulling the engine, main bearing replacement requires the engine to come out of the vehicle. The repair cost on a Mercedes inline-6 or V8 engine starts at $3,000 and reaches $5,000 or above. A full engine rebuild with new main bearings, rod bearings, piston rings, and seals runs between $5,000 and $10,000 on a Mercedes V8. The rebuild cost versus engine replacement decision depends on the condition of the block and head. A specialist who has torn down the engine can answer that question. A dealer quoting from a description of the noise cannot. There is a narrower margin for error with this noise than with any of the others above it on this list. If you hear this sound and the oil pressure light is flickering, the car goes to the shop today, not this week. Today. The dealer is not the villain at this stage. The villain is any recommendation, including extended oil change intervals, that allowed the engine to reach this condition. Robert from Denver heard a low rumble from his 2009 ML350 at 131,000 miles. The oil light had flickered twice over the previous week. Main bearing failure was confirmed on teardown. The engine rebuild cost $6,200. An oil pressure sensor fault had masked the underlying low pressure condition for approximately 8,000 miles before the sound appeared. Just ahead is the noise that ends the conversation entirely, and why the owners who ignore it turn a $10,000 repair into a paperweight. Number 1. A sudden, loud knock that appeared without warning. You start the car and hear a heavy, loud knock that was not there yesterday, or the knock appeared suddenly during a drive and has not stopped. This is not a gradual progression. It appeared in a moment and it is severe. A sudden loud knock in a Mercedes engine is almost always one of two things: a spun bearing or a dropped valve. A spun bearing occurs when an oil-starved bearing rotates inside its housing rather than the shaft rotating inside the bearing. When a bearing spins, it destroys the journal surface it contacts and often the connecting rod bore as well. Once a bearing spins, the damage is immediate and total. No oil change, no additive, and no continued driving improves the outcome. The metal debris from the initial failure circulates through the oil system within minutes of the event. Each minute of continued operation after a spun bearing adds contamination to bearing surfaces and oil galleries throughout the engine. An engine shut off immediately at the first sudden knock has options. An engine driven home on a sudden knock often does not. A dropped valve occurs when a valve spring or retainer fails and the valve falls into the combustion chamber. The piston, still moving at engine speed, contacts the valve. What happens next is not something engine components recover from. According to teardown analysis published by SL Motorsports on multiple Mercedes-AMG engine failures, both spun bearings and dropped valves result in damage that cannot be selectively repaired. The cylinder affected requires complete attention, and the metal contamination from the initial failure travels through the oil system to affect other components. The correct response to a sudden loud knock is to shut the engine off immediately and not restart it. Every restart after a spun bearing or dropped valve causes additional damage. Every additional minute of running reduces the viable repair options. An engine with a spun bearing caught before further damage costs between $8,000 and $12,000 to repair on a Mercedes V6 or V8. An engine with a spun bearing that was driven on after the knock appeared may cost that much per affected cylinder or simply require full replacement. Full engine replacement on a Mercedes V8 runs between $9,000 and $18,000 depending on the model, year, and parts availability. The dealer will correctly diagnose this. The issue is not the diagnosis. The issue is every mile driven after the sound appeared. Daniel from Seattle heard a sudden loud knock in his 2014 E550 AMG on the highway. He drove 12 more miles to get home. The bearing had spun. Those 12 miles spread metal contamination through 3 additional rod bearings. A repair that would have cost $9,000 became a full engine replacement at $16,400. Shut it off. That is the entire instruction for this noise. Shut it off and call the shop from where you stopped. Hey, thanks for watching. Which of these noises is your Mercedes making right now? Let us know in the comments, especially if a dealer has already quoted you for it. Want to see all Mercedes warning lights explained the same way? Click on the left. I'll catch you there.